So we're just doing a full setup on this brand new to me Gibson Gordie Johnson SG. I've taken the strings off, bridge is off. I just checked the truss rod, and what I do here is I give it a quick turn, maybe an 1/8 of an inch to loosen it, and then about the same amount to tighten it back up to where it was. And I do this just to see that the truss rod is working and not stuck. And what I do after that is I put a little bit of Vaseline on the end of the threads here, and the purpose of that is to hopefully prevent the truss rod nut from seizing on there in the future. Next step, I go around the guitar, I check for tightness on all of these. These were all loose, I did tighten them all. I will also check the jack socket, make sure it's tight. I check the neck for relief with the strings off. This, I rock it back and forth. It's a 30 centimeter ruler. We are probably flat to a little bit of a back bow without the strings on, so that's perfect. When I checked it before I took the strings off, the string tension had it just about perfectly flat. So when we string it back up, we'll give it another check and we can still play with this if we need to. Next step, I have, this is 3M, the name of the product is escaping me, but Scotch-Brite. It is the equivalent of 4/0 steel wool, which is what you would normally use to polish your frets. So here I've got some steel wool and some fret guards, but this is better because it doesn't leave any metal filings that are going to get stuck on your pickups. And also, if you're going to be using the 4/0 steel wool, you're going to want to tape off your guitar here. With this, you really don't need to do that. And I just did a quick over because there's some corrosion on the frets that I see. And I've seen people, I saw the technician at Long and McQuaid on their setup day once. I stood beside him and talked to him, and he used steel wool. He even was using it to clean the fretboard, so I think very fine steel wool if that's okay. And I have naphtha. I'm going to run some naphtha along the fretboard too. I'll give each of these frets a quick little polish as I go along, just like that. You can see that just takes that oxidation right off them, makes them nice and shiny again. So I've gone over the frets with my Scotch-Brite. This Scotch-Brite product I had to order from Ackland's Granger. You cannot get this at Canadian Tire. They have Scotch-Brite. It's not the same stuff. There's a chart. You can find it on the internet. You want the stuff that is the equivalent of the steel wool, the 4/0 steel wool, or I think it's 3000 grit. So it's very, very, very mild. Now, on a guitar that has no binding, I'll go over this edge here with my hand just to see if there's any high frets, and sorry, not high frets, but protruding edges, fret sprout, and then I'll use this little diamond file. If you pull this out, this is the same one they sell at StuMac. It has a, oh, if you can see that, it's got a rounded edge and a flat side, and basically like this, like this, like this. It's going to take off all the edge there, right where the fret comes hanging over the fretboard. But this particular guitar has binding, which is very nice. Every guitar I've owned that has a bound edge fretboard has no issues with, I've heard all sorts of criticisms about the bound edges here, getting a string stuck in here. I've never seen binding that's that far from the edge of the fret to have that happen. But the thing that I think is really nice is that you definitely are not going to get fret sprout. And that's something that's going to happen commonly here in our climate because of the very dry winter weather and indoor heating and so on. So bound edge on the fretboard is something very good in my view. Of course, it looks nice too. So I went over the fretboard a little bit at the same time here, just to take off some of the junk that's from just from playing. You get grime in beside the fret there. So I just go over it lightly here. This is a beautiful fretboard, by the way. You can see some nice figuring in the rosewood. I don't know if you can see that. Then I'm going to go over it with some naphtha. So I'll just take a break here for a sec. One thing that's a real peeve of mine is when people take off the truss rod cover and they use the wrong size screwdriver to tighten or loosen these bolts. Never do that. That strips this tiny little screw at the head, and that hasn't happened on this guitar, thankfully, but it makes it really annoying later on if that is stripped. You will find that every single screw on a used guitar, and probably on a new guitar when you get it, unless it had just been gone over before you picked it up, but every single screw is going to need to be checked. And by every screw, I mean every screw. So I have checked all the pickup ring screws. I did not obviously play with the pickup height adjustment screws, but the pickguard screws, the electronics cavity screws, strap button screws, and the screws on the back of the tuners. And this truly is probably an insignificant detail to just about anyone, but I did check these strap buttons. Remember when I said you need to use the correct size screwdriver? Here's an example where you need a large screwdriver. Use the little screwdriver for just about everything on here. Large Phillips for the strap buttons. These strap buttons have a felt grommet separating them from the body, and that is very unusual for a Gibson. Every Fender guitar I've ever seen has those, and I have never seen a Gibson guitar with those. Gibson does not put these on their guitars. So my guess is that somebody did that. A previous owner did that. Unless that's a special feature of the Gordie Johnson SG, which would be pretty weird, but anyway. They did go so far as to put a 70s style Gibson headstock on this guitar. It was built in 2003. So that is a interesting feature, and I do not know if in 2003 they had any 70s reproduction guitars that they would have used a 70s style large headstock on. Since I'm at it here, I'll mention the other thing that makes this an interesting guitar is that it has these P94 pickups. These are a single coil like a P90, but they're meant to fit in a humbucker routed guitar. The story is that Gordie Johnson has an SG very much like this that he bought at a pawn shop in Toronto many years ago, and did not like the humbucker pickups. It was a 70 SG, I can guess, and he didn't like the humbuckers that were in it, and he swapped those out for a aftermarket Gibson P94 set. And later, this is the basis of the guitar that they used to make the Gordie Johnson limited edition SG. Only made in 2003, and as I understand it, only 50 of these guitars were produced. This is a lighter fluid, Roncinol, and what it is actually is naphtha, and this is a excellent cleaning product. So this probably looks crazy to some of you, but what you do next is you use this stuff to clean any smudge that's left on your fretboard, any grime that's in there, and this naphtha will evaporate very quickly, so it's good for cleaning. It doesn't wet the wood or change the moisture content of it any. It evaporates almost immediately. And after I'm done, we are going to have one very nice and clean fretboard ready for new strings. Actually, there is one more step that we're going to take. So I'm going to clean the entire guitar in a similar way here. This will clean the all the dust that gets in around the headstock here. So that's all going to be clean. All this down in here. Give the whole guitar a wipe with. I'll probably at that point just put some naphtha on this cloth and then give it all a good wipe. And then the last step before putting on strings is going to be to oil the fretboard. Now you can buy products like lemon oil. There's a Gibson fret oil that they put on. They sell at Long and McQuaid. But okay, so now the fretboard is clean. We clean that with the Scotch-Brite pads that I showed you. We use the naphtha to clean any of the grime that was remaining on the fretboard. And now I have just oiled it using some of this light mineral oil. And this is what lemon oil or guitar fretboard oil is. Mineral oil with scents and maybe some other additives. But the main thing is that you condition it with something like this. Do you need to? I don't know. Does it change the moisture content of the wood? I don't know. I mean, I hear people say the fretboard looks dry. It needs to be oiled. This is interesting. If you look closely here, you can see there are two ink marks. And similarly, two ink marks, a little bit harder to see there. Let's just see here, right here, right there, right there. And I presume this was done at the factory when the guitar was set up. One little thing I did was I removed the studs here, and I wiped them down with a Q-tip that just had a little bit of Vaseline on it. Again, there was some corrosion here, and that Vaseline cleaned that up nicely, and it'll serve hopefully as a penetrating type oil that will protect those threads in the future. Forward, one argument against having them facing backward is that if you screw your stop tail down, there'll be a extreme break angle, possibly, between the saddle and that stop bar, and it could be touching the string on the back of the adjusting screw, which would probably... Using GarageBand here, the tuner feature, I like to have the guitar plugged in through my interface. Gonna tune it up a little bit flat there, but you see, we'll tune it up so that we're good on the open strings, and then we're going to do the same thing, but I'm going to fret the 12th string. Sorry, I'm going to fret the guitar at the 12th fret for each of those same notes, and then we will adjust the saddles, either forward or backwards. Just a little bit flat, so we're going to tune that up. And now at the 12th fret, not sure how easy this is going to be for me to do, but a little bit sharp, So if it's a little bit sharp, what we're going to do is we are going to turn this screw, and we are going to move the saddle backwards a little bit. The longer your distance between your bridge and nut is, the flatter the sound is going to be, and the shorter, the sharper the sound. Higher, shorter, lower, longer. But you can see we're pretty much bang on. I moved the saddle back a little bit and made the effective length between the saddle and nut just slightly longer to get the intonation correct on the D string.